Once upon a time, George Lucas wanted to make a movie that would, in his very own words, be a Star Wars for girls. He spent 15 years kicking that idea around, and what we got was this. It's also a jukebox musical cartoon based off a Shakespearean comedy. Unsurprisingly, this film did not achieve pop culture phenomenon status. In fact, it straight up bombed. I've talked to some hardcore Lucas fans who had no idea this movie even existed. So, how does this happen? How does a movie with so many big names and $75 million behind it crash and burn like this? I'm going to answer all of those questions while I paint some tabletop miniatures as a tribute to my favorite disaster of a film, Strange Magic. Since official merchandise from the movie was never released, I had to improvise and use these WizKids miniatures, which needed a fair amount of alteration. This was really my first time modifying minis like this, and I actually had a lot of fun working on this project. Anyway, let's get to the movie. Lucas wanted Strange Magic to be a Beauty and the Beast story where the Beast doesn't change in the end. He wanted it to be a romantic comedy about finding beauty in strange places. Initially, he had hoped to make this a musical using only Beatles music, but after realizing how expensive the rights to each song was going to be, he scrapped that plan. In the end, we still got a musical, but it's a totally random mix of songs from different eras and genres. Everything from Elvis to Bob Marley to Kelly Clarkson. At one point, the creative team had considered not even having dialogue in between the musical sequences, but in the end, they scrapped that idea and threw together a pretty clunky script for the sake of exposition. The soundtrack itself has some really great moments and interesting covers of classic rock songs that are definitely worth checking out if you're into that kind of thing. The voice acting cast put a lot of hard work into it, but allegedly they didn't really have a clear idea of what the final film was going to be, so things feel a little bit disjointed from time to time. To direct this film, George Lucas brought on Hollywood sound design legend Gary Rydstrom. Rydstrom is an Academy Award winning sound designer whose work you are probably familiar with if you've seen Jurassic Park, Titanic, Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, and almost any Pixar movie. If you didn't know going into this film that it was inspired by William Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, you probably never would pick up on it. Both stories have fairies and a love potion, but that's where the similarities end. We kick off the movie with the main character, Princess Marianne, catching her fiance Roland cheating on her wedding day. She swears off men, puts on her tough girl eyeshadow, and devotes her life to the sword. Roland continues to pursue her for the sake of political gain, eventually resorting to using a forbidden love potion to trick her into marrying him. Marianne's younger sister gets kidnapped by the Bog King, the ruler of the neighboring kingdom, and as punishment for stealing the forbidden potion, Marianne has to go into the dark woods and get her back. Unfortunately, the love potion's effects cause a mix-up where her sister falls in love with the Bog King, forcing him to work together with Marianne to find an antidote. After about 10 minutes of kicking around the Bog King's castle, they sing a duet followed by a "You betrayed me" moment when Roland shows up with an army, and in the end, everyone gets a date for fairy prom, and we are treated to this acid trip of an end sequence. In an era of copy and paste character designs and same face syndrome, Strange Magic actually gave us something new and different to look at, for better or worse. A lot of critics complained about the Uncanny Valley effect, and it's really easy to see why. The exaggerated body proportions juxtaposed with the weirdly realistic textures and facial features don't leave you with the warm, fuzzy feeling that you get from the Pixar style of animation. If you're a big fan of old school fantasy artwork, you might not mind this as much. Typically, this is a character design style that appeals more to an older audience, but since this movie is written for younger people, it kind of failed to find an audience at all. There were some really memorable visual moments in Strange Magic that took me back to films like Ferngully and The Dark Crystal. But even as a kid, both of those movies kind of scared the hell out of me. Regardless, if you're into animation and character design, Strange Magic is worth checking out just for their creative approach to designing fairies, goblins, and fantasy settings in general. So, why did it bomb? At the end of the day, I just don't think they really knew who their audience was going to be. A more adult version of this film would have been even harder to market, and those don't typically do any better in the box office. The point George Lucas wanted to make was that we should look for love and beauty in places that we wouldn't normally find it. I'm not sure that Strange Magic makes that message really abundantly clear, and it didn't help that the movie was marketed more as a girls are powerful feminism film instead of what it really is, a romantic comedy about bug people. But in my opinion, it is starting to feel like Pixar and Disney have perfected the formula of spoon feeding their audience these homogenized, easily digestible, feel good movies. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but for all of Strange Magic's flaws, it succeeded at being unique. I really enjoy the hell out of any film that doesn't take itself too seriously, and this definitely falls into that category. Anyway, here are my finished miniatures. I was really bummed out when they didn't put any merchandise out for this movie, so I've actually wanted to make these for years now. The wings I used for Marianne were cut out from a piece of butterfly print fabric and repainted, and the Bog King's wings came from a set of plastic dragonflies. The dragonfly wings were actually really challenging to glue together and secure to the figure, but I got there eventually. The Bog King's staff is just a piece of wire and a bead that I very haphazardly wrapped around the edge of the spear. I could have tried to find a more humanoid head for this guy, but frankly, that was more effort than I was willing to put into this project. I'd love to put together a series of painting miniatures and reviewing old science fiction and fantasy films, if you guys are interested in that. Drop a suggestion down in the comments if there's an obscure film you think is worth discussing. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.